Hello, Mark Sabatella with the Mastering MuseScore School here. In this lesson, I want to show you a short introduction to the accessibility features within MuseScore. So in my own courses, I use MuseScore to produce handouts, including in the music courses, the basic music theory and the harmony and chord progressions, for example. I create handouts using MuseScore, and I've created them in such a way that you should be able to read them using nothing but keyboard and screen reader within MuseScore. And so I want to show you how to do that. So I currently have MuseScore installed, and this is a Windows machine, and I have NVDA running. That combination works really well. If you're using JAWS, there's some scripts you can get from musescore.org, and I'll include information on that. And also on Linux, there are scripts to use with Orca, and I'll have that information. This tutorial is going to focus really just on how to read a score and how to read a score that's of the form of these handouts. So I'm not going to cover every detail of using MuseScore, and really just how to read a score. So I'm going to open up a score right now. So I'm going to use Control-O, the standard open shortcut.
Load score dialog file name, combo box.
And so it's a standard file dialog. And the score that I'm going to choose here is called Inversions and Voicing. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. I've typed the first few letters, and now I'll hit the down arrow.
Inversion and voicing.mscz.
That's what I want. MSCZ is the extension for MuseScore file. So I'm going to select that.
MuseScore 3, inversion and voicing window, split button. All right, I'm going
to stop there. You're going to hear split button a lot from NVDA in MuseScore because there's a whole lot of sort of invisible controls, not really controls, but panes, just organizational things that it just reads split button for. And that's just the way it is. We're working to try to streamline that, but for now, just expect to hear split button at random times. So right now, the inversion and voicing handout is loaded. And really all you need to go through one of these handouts is Alt and the right arrow. So Alt, right arrow will go through any score an element at a time. It's not the only thing you need, but it's the main thing you need. So I'm going to right now press Alt, right arrow.
Vertical frame title inversion and voicing.
So vertical frame means this is a frame. It's a thing that contains text. Title is telling me what kind of text it contains, and then inversion and voicing. It read it. So now I'm going to press Alt right arrow.
Text frame text accord may occur with a note other than the root at the bottom. A chord with the root at the bottom is said to be in root position. A chord with the third at the bottom.
And so on. So it said text frame. This is a frame containing text. And then it starts reading the text. Chord may contain blah, 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 blah. So that frame is selected. I'm going to hit Alt right arrow now to see what's next.
Bar line single bar line measure 1 beat 1 staff 1, piano.
So it's telling me it is now in some music, right? And it's telling me it's on the bar line at the beginning of that staff, and it's staff number 1. There might be more than one staff here, and we'll find that out shortly. I'm going to go ahead and hit the Alt right arrow again.
Treble clef beat 1.
Now notice when it put the bar line there, it read beat 1, measure 1. Once we hit the clef, it just says beat 1 because we assume we're still in measure 1. So everything you're going to hear is measure 1 until you hear it read measure 2. I'll hit Alt right again.
Key signature open / atonal beat 1.
So it says open atonal key signature. This is a special thing in MuseScore. It's a key signature that doesn't really mean anything. So when you hear open atonal key signature, it just really means you can ignore it. If it was going to be a real key signature like G major, it would tell you G major or E minor. But the open atonal one is one that doesn't, it means there's not really a key. This isn't really music, right? This is just a handout. So it's different than a C major key signature. It's an actual non-existent key signature. Okay, so I'm going to hit Alt right arrow again.
Time signature 4/4 time beat 1.
Okay, so we're in 4/4 time again.
Note G4 whole beat 1 staff text root position.
So it read G4 and a whole note. So we know we have a whole note G. And it read the text. It said staff text. That's what type of text it is. It said root position. I'll hit Alt right again.
Note E4 whole beat 1.
So there's an E4 also on beat 1. So this G4 and the E4 are both on beat 1.
Note C4 whole beat 1 fingering R.
All right, so this was a C4 also on beat 1. So that's telling you there's 3 notes there, C, E, and G, all on the same beat. And this one has a fingering, R. Now, it doesn't literally mean a fingering. I use that in these handouts just to indicate if I need to put a little notation on a particular note. That R is telling you that that C is the root. And if we had really been paying attention to what the previous text had been reading, you'd understand why I label it that way. I'm going to keep going.
Fingering R beat 1.
And now it actually reads. So it read the fingering when we reached the note, but then Alt right will actually move the cursor to the fingering itself, and it reads the fingering again. So here comes Alt right again.
Staff text root position beat 1.
And now it's going to read that staff text. Again, it read that staff text when we first got to this chord, but it also, Alt-Right, will take me to that staff text again. By the way, if you don't want that, you can just use left and right, and then it will skip. It'll read the text when you get to the note, but it won't actually move the cursor to the text. But then you'll also miss out on things like bar lines and clefs. So I usually recommend using Alt-Right and Alt-Left to move left. So anyhow, we'll move on.
Bar line single bar line measure 2 beat 1.
Okay, that's bar line in measure 2. So now that was the end of measure 1, and we're about to start measure 2. I'll hit Alt-Right again.
Note C5 whole beat 1 staff text first inversion.
And so it's now reading us a C5, and you heard it play the note, and it's the C an octave higher than middle C, and it read the text, and so on. I can read all the notes here. So that is how you can read through this score a note at a time. I'm actually gonna go and show a couple other shortcuts, like because you definitely want to do this, go through one note at a time. But for illustration purposes, I'm not going to do that. I want to just move on. So I'm going to go pretty quickly here until I hear it read me another frame.
Fingering 3 beat 1. Staff text first inversion, bar line single bar line fingering staff text second, bar line single bar line, horizontal. Text frame text inversions are often labeled according to the inverals above the bottom note.
So did you hear it read text frame? That's how I know I'm at the next explanation. The way all these handouts are organized is there'll be a text frame with some explanation, and then there'll be some music, and then a text frame, and then some music, a text frame, and then some music. Occasionally, maybe there's 2 text frames in a row, but this is the basic way that they are going to be organized. So I'm now on the next text frame, and let me move on to the next little chunk of music.
Bar line single bar line measure 4 beat 1 staff 1, piano.
Great. So I can then do the same thing of using Alt-Right to go through a note or one element at a time. But now I want to show you that these will actually play back. So this time I'm just going to hit the space bar.
Space. Bar line single bar line beat 1.
So
space. Normal mode. Bar line single bar line beat 1.
All right, I need to tell you what just happened there. I pressed space, and it actually read the bar line again. Not really sure why. I guess it must read whatever is selected. But then it actually started playing, and it played one chord. We heard a chord. It was basically a first inversion C chord. And then we heard the second chord. That was a second inversion C chord. And if I had bothered to read the entire text frame before that, you would understand why that example is there. And then it paused at the end of that. So when you hear a pause, it means we're at the end of that little musical section. You should then hit the space bar to stop the playback, because otherwise the playback will eventually go on. It'll pause about 3 seconds, and then it will go on. And at this point, we'll be playing the next example. and you will have skipped the text. So you probably don't want that. So when you hear a pause of more than a second, go ahead and hit space to pause it again. And now we will be ready to read the next text frame. So let's find out where we are. I'm going to hit Alt right.
Treble clef beat 1.
Okay.
Key signature open slash a tonal, note C5 whole beat 1 fingering me, note G4 whole, fingering me 3, above, note
So
E4 whole beat 1.
I'm just moving ahead until I come to another text frame. Now I have to think, is there a better way to do this than that? And I'm not sure there is. I'm not sure there's a really reliable way to move to the next text frame. But that's okay. Normally you would want to actually read the example.
Roman numeral 6 3 6, beat 1.
So Roman numeral, that's because I'm indicating the inversion here. So if you've actually studied this, you know that 6-3 is the notation for a first inversion chord.
Chord symbol C slash E beat 1.
And then there's an actual chord symbol there, and it went ahead and played it for me.
Bar line single bar line measure 5 beat 1. Note E5 whole, fingering moth, note C5 whole beat 1, fingering P4, note G4 whole beat 1. Roman numerals. Chord symbol. Bar line single bar, horizontal frame layout break.
Now when you heard the horizontal frame there, that horizontal frame is basically, it's a spacing thing that's used so that it looks good on the page. It basically keeps the music from extending all the way to the right, because normally the music would go all the way to the right side of the page. But if you're only putting 2 chords on the page, if you think about how that might look in Braille, there would be no reason to extend that all the way to the, there's only a handful of cells. You wouldn't need to go all the way to the edge of the page. So in MuseScore, horizontal frame does it. So when you hear horizontal frame, you'll know that you're basically at the end of a line of music. Some lines of music won't have horizontal frames, though, because there's no reason for it. I really want the music to go to the edge. But I know now, because of that frame, I'm probably at the end of this example. And when I hit Alt right, I'll probably be on a text frame.
Text frame text. The notes in a chord can be spread out to span more than an octave, which often involves use of multiple staves.
So there you have it. It's that's the text frame. So that is the process. There's only one other thing I really need to show you about this, and I'm going to hit Alt right arrow again.
Bar line single bar line measure 6 beat 1 staff 1, piano.
Now notice it's always read staff 1, and it will do that even if there's only one staff. And a lot of these handouts will only use one staff, because if I'm just demonstrating a scale, you don't need 2 staves for that. But if I'm trying to demonstrate something that requires multiple staves, there will be multiple staves, and sometimes there might be multiple staves that are only used for part of the score. When we heard that playback, you could tell, right? We only heard those 3 notes, and that's what we heard. It was a 3-note triad, and it played them. But I'm going to play now, and let's listen to what happens.
Space. Bar line single bar line beat 1.
It's unfortunate
Space.
that
Normal mode. Bar line single bar line beat 1.
Sorry, when I press space to stop it, it'll tell me now it's gone to normal mode instead of play mode, and it will reread what's selected, which is the bar line. So get used to that. And but when you played that, maybe you could tell that those chords were actually 2-handed chords on the piano. So there's actually another staff there. If you didn't know already there was another staff, you would be able to find out. So I'm going to hit Alt right until I reach that first note.
Treble clef beat. Key signature open slash a tonal, note G4 whole beat 1 staff text root position close voicing.
Okay, so I'm on that G, and it's still on staff 1, but there is a second staff here. I know that. How would you find out? Well, what you can do is press Alt and down arrow, and it will go down to the next staff.
Note E4 whole beat 1.
Actually, it doesn't go down to the next staff, it just goes down to the next note further down. So if there's more than one note at the same time, Alt down will take you to the next lower note. I'm going to hit Alt down again.
Note C4 whole beat 1.
Now I'm going to hit Alt down one more time.
Rest measure beat 1 staff 2, piano.
There's a rest. a measure rest in particular. It's a whole rest that takes up the whole measure. There's a measure rest there on staff 2. So now I'm on staff 2. So we know there's 2 staves. Let me hit Alt down again.
Rest measure beat 1.
Well, this time it didn't read anything new. It just read the same thing. So it basically means I didn't go anywhere. Alt down didn't do anything. Let me hit it again just to be sure. Nothing actually happened when I hit Alt down again. So I think maybe I actually don't know. Sometimes if you hit Alt down, it'll read the same thing again. Sometimes it won't read anything. Either way, if you don't hear it change, if you don't hear anything having changed, you'll know you've kind of reached the end. But now that I'm on staff 2, I can start using Alt right and it will stay on staff 2.
Bar line single bar line measure 7 beat 1.
This is on staff 2 because it didn't tell me it went back to staff 1. I know it's still on staff 2. I'm going to hit Alt right again.
Note G3 whole beat 1.
So it's a G there on beat 1 of measure 2 here. Now, if I'm in doubt about which staff I'm on, there's a shortcut for that also. Shift L for location will just tell you where you are. Also, if you accidentally lose the selection, Shift L will actually restore it. So I'm going to press Shift L right now to find out, well, wait a minute, which staff am I on? Which measure am I on?
L. Note G3 whole measure 7 beat 1 staff 2, piano.
There you go. It read the whole thing. It read the note again. It read the time position. It read the measure number, and it read the staff number and name. So those are the commands that you'll need. And then Alt up arrow would move me back up to the top staff.
Note E4 whole beat 1 staff 1, piano.
And now this time it told me staff 1, because whenever it changes staves, it'll read the staff name again. And is that the only note on that staff? I don't know. Let's hit Alt up arrow again.
Note C5 whole beat 1 fingering doubled root staff text root position open voicing.
All right, so we had a C there. Let me hit Alt up arrow again. Is there anything else? It just played the same note again, didn't read anything. So I know I've kind of hit the top of that chord. Let me play it back. So yeah, that's...
Space. Normal mode. Note C5 whole beat 1 fingering doubled root staff text root position open voicing. Note C5 whole...
I'll just stop that. So yeah, after I press space to stop the playback, it's going to read where it's at, which is actually somewhat useful, so you know where you're selected, so you know where navigation will start from again. But I just stopped it because I don't think you will need to know that. So this is something that it will take some practice to kind of go through, and you really will have to think about where you are. It's reading a map of some kind, right? You've got to form some form of mental model of what's going on with the music. So there's definitely a challenge to it, but just the fact that you can hear the text being read and you can hear the examples being played, even if you don't actually pay attention to every note in those examples, you can still get a lot out of them by having the screen reader read that text and play the examples. And then if you really want to study the examples, then pay attention as you're going through one note at a time and think about what's actually happening. So this is how all of the handouts in my courses work. It's the same sort of model of text frames with explanation in them, and then some musical examples, and then text frame and musical examples until you reach the end of the score.